Mike, welcome. How are you today, pal? What's going on?
So you were doing a little back and forth with Steve about interviewing, and I always wonder when you interview, when you say this term, we'll get to that later. I always thought you kind of were saying that to take control of the conversation, but then with the author of the Babe Ruth book with Lou Gehrig, I think I felt like you said it to kind of to slow his down or change.
Yeah, you hit it right in the bat. See, there is something that you can't teach that, or you learn that because you do it enough, and that's where the interview process. You bring in an interview guy to tell folks this. You have to figure it out. Tony Castro was very enthusiastic. He wrote a very good book, excellent, very enthusiastic, loved being on. But he couldn't wait to give you all the information.
Right.
So the result of the interview then becomes, I try to set it up in chronological order. This is a book about Gehrig and Ruth and their feud and then their friendship and then their feud. And you like to set that interview up in a chronological order where you begin in, say, 1923 or 24 and then take yourself through the late 30s when Gehrig gets sick.
Right.
I wasn't able to do that with Tony because Tony got to that part before I was able to set it back. So what I had to do there, and since you picked up on it because you listen enough, what I had to do there is bring the interview back from a 1938-37 Ruth leaves the Yankee deal to when Gehrig started with the Yankees in 1925.
Okay.
And so that's when I say we'll get back to that later, meaning the speech. Let's start again in 1925.
Okay.
Because Tony was about to go to that speech before he had set up the first 10 years of them playing together in the 20s and the early 30s.
Okay.
That's why
you also do, too, and you can't teach this, is when you interview people, whether it's Bill Ripken or the guy from the Mets, you talk a little about them. The guy from the Mets went to Woodstock. Bill Ripken's kid plays softball. And, I use the same thing when people walk into the gym and I'm talking to them and, you're selling yourself. You're trying to, make them find interest in what they want to speak about, and you make it so what they're talking about is important. You make them interesting, and then you get to the conversation.
Well, we shouldn't be talking about my interviewing technique because who cares? But here is the issue, and this is where nobody's going to teach you this. A good interviewer, the number one point is you cannot be afraid. Forget the tough question. Sometimes you got to take a couple of chances and bring up topics that is something a little offbeat, because when you do that, you get a good response.
Right.
And you can't treat every interview like, okay, the row, by the book. Let's do this. We'll start here, end here, and we'll get to this in between. Sometimes when you throw the guy the curveball and you throw in something different, you will get a very unique response. Now the problem.
You got that with Krzyzewski, a couple of interviews.
Krzyzewski, Loyola, good example. You bring up Loyola, listening to the game when he was in 1963 in Loyola. Interview. So that's the sort of thing that you have to. Remember, you can do that and get completely burned because you can ask that and he can give you nothing, and then you're dead.
Like Ray Barry.
Yeah, so you have to be careful. Like Ray Berry is a good one, because I asked a lot of things to Raymond Berry that one time when he was lost. So you have to be careful of how to do it. But to me, the positives outweigh the negatives. If you do that, you will get yourself good responses, and then you make the interview guy, the interviewee, you make he or she comfortable, and you'll get a better interview out of it. That's a technique that you can't teach. You learn how to do it when you do all these interviews. Simple as that.
Right. It's a people thing. By the way, I did have a question on the guy from the guy you were just talking about that went to the school. The college school. They went to the.
Talk about Jai, the baseball player?
No, the guy, the basketball player from the '63 team.
Harkness, Jerry Harkness.
Right, he was great.
Good spot.
He was explaining when he said he came back from, and he had a great attitude. When he came back on the train, he stated that the Germans had free reign on the train, and he had to sit in the back of the train. I don't quite understand that. Was he coming back to the U.S.? I didn't quite understand.
We were talking about, I think we got into the race relations scenario, and I had asked Jerry, boy, look at you, a young kid in Harlem, segregated schools, and you're following the 55 Dodgers, and your favorite players are not Campanella, Newcomb, or Robinson. They are Duke Snider and Gil Hodges. And he said, yeah, that is a little weird when you consider that, a lot of African Americans fought against the Germans in World War II, and they do a good job, and then they come back to America, and they got to sit in the back of the bus while the Germans, who are German Americans, sit in the front of the bus. That's the way I took that. That's where I took it. I'll give you a perfect example of the of asking something different. Mike Socha is a good interview. Okay, we don't get him on much, but he's thoughtful. I get him on TV a little bit. Last year, and remember, those TV interviews are different. You got 6-7 minutes, all right? He's looking into a camera. He's standing there. It's a totally different kind of interview than 25 minutes here. He's comfortable with his feet up, on a cell phone somewhere talking. But I asked Socha recently, it was last year. He was on it, before a day game on MLB Network. And I say, Mike, before we start, how about the homer that you hit against Gooden in '88? Now, that home run's 30 years ago. That's Game 4 of the NLCS, Dodgers-Mets in Shea Stadium. And who doesn't want to talk about that home run? So what does Socha do? Socha talks about the home run, and he says, the thing I remember about that most of all is when I was running around the bases, all I remember hearing is my cleat in the dirt because it was so quiet at Shea Stadium. He loosens up. All of a sudden, you get a 6.5-minute, 7-minute interview out of him. You want to make sure when you interview somebody, and this is why you can't go by any teachers. You want to make sure that the guy who finishes his interview has enjoyed it. He got off the phone and he had a good time and he enjoyed it. I'll give you a perfect example, another one. And Eddie remembers it, Eddie Erickson. Before Game 1. Before the World Series, Game 1 on Monday in Dodger Stadium. Who do we have on? Doc Rivers. I tracked Doc down. Doc did the spot. Coaching the Clippers. It was right before the season it was right when the season had begun. I asked Doc all sorts of questions. One about coaching his son. How about do you deal with traffic in L.A.? What do you do about shoot-arounds? Those kind of different kind of questions. 28 minutes. I thanked him afterwards. Text during an update. Doc came back and said, loved every minute of it. You want to make sure that the guy, when he's finished with the interview, enjoyed doing the interview. Because then when you want him again, here, come on. And you approach different interviews. I'm going to treat Patrick McEnroe somewhat differently than I'm going to treat, say, Rob Manfred. P-Mac's a friend, we can joke around. Manfred, I got to treat that a little differently. I mean, he's the commissioner of the sport. Goodell, a little differently. Bettman, a little differently. Adam Silver, when he comes on, a little differently. You got to treat each individual interview. You have to approach it in a different framework. And that's what I was kidding with Steve about when, he's got a guy upstairs, nicest man in the world, who is basically telling you what Sal Palantonio should or should not have asked at sidelines at halftime of a ball game. That's not the same as doing a 25-minute radio interview. Take chances when you do an interview. Take some chances. You get a bet. You might, once in a while, you might get burned with it. You might get burned. But in the long run, it's a plus. Here's Mark in Maryland, and he says hello. He's on Mad Dog Unleashed. Mark, good afternoon. How are you today, pal? What's going on?
Hey, Chris, pretty good. Hey, I wanted to talk about this baseball schedule and the weather that's been going on. And I know you've been talking about cutting the thing back to 154, and everybody seems to be saying that the owners don't want to give up the gate and all this kind of stuff. But, I mean, if nobody's going to these games anyway,
well, it's TV. You got to remember that. You got to remember TV too, Mark. They get good ratings for these games.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's why they play a lot of night games early in the year, because they get better ratings at night than they do in the daytime.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it is a problem, like you were saying. But
I mean, did the Mets play the Nationals in the daytime or at night this week at Citi Field?
Yeah, that's true.
Did the Red Sox and Yankees, did they play night games last week in Fenway or day games?
Yep, you're right.
They played night games. Why? Because Nesson and Yes will get better ratings at night than they will in the daytime. So the whole world's going to freeze over. You're going to have the ballpark frigid 11:30 at night in early April because the TV rating is better at 11:30 at night than it is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
There's some truth to that.
Yep. Go ahead.
Somebody's telling me though, like when when you open a stadium up, you have to have like 100 extra cops on duty and stuff. I'm sure the city doesn't put that, front that either. I mean,
no, the team pays for that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's
city does not. When the ballpark is opened up, Mark, and there's policemen there, and it has to be.
Right.
That is, I mean, the city doesn't pay for that.
No.
I mean, there might be some deal that they had, or they may split it or something, but the team has to pay for security at the ballpark.
Sure.
I mean, and if it's overtime, you don't think the city pays for the overtime, do you? No, the New York Yankees do. The Mets do.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. They want to make sure that at least they get a decent crowd in there.
See, once they open up the gates, they want to play the game,
right?
Because they've already opened up the gates, which means they hired the ushers, the concession stands are open, the parking attendants have been situated, and they have to get paid. So they are being paid. So baseball says, hold on now. If I'm opening up the gates and I got the concession guys open, I got the parking lots open, I got the bathroom attendants set up, I got the ushers, I got police for security scenarios, we're going to wait here all night to get this game in. That's the problem.
Yeah. As far as you were talking about the weather, too, being bad, I mean, this year's been unusually bad. But this has been going on now for a little while, whereas, with these April games and the cold, when we go to divide up the season tickets for the year, most of us avoid these April games, as much as you can, and then they let you trade some of them, for other games later in the year, and that's what we end up doing because, in D.C., I mean, the weather's not going to be warm until, it turns to May probably, and people that go into these games now are going to be sitting out in the cold. There's no doubt about that.
The temperatures at these games in April is ridiculous. They have had an abnormal April. The best suggestion that you could do to keep a little historical perspective going, and in a perfect world, what I would do in a perfect world, I would play 154 games, which would eliminate 8 games, which is about 10 days of the season, and I would make each team play a minimum of 2 single admission doubleheaders in the course of the year, which buys you 2 extra days. That's 12 days. And then you can start the season theoretically around April 12th instead of starting it on March 28th. And you play 154. Now, that is what they should do. So teams have to play doubleheaders. They have 2 scheduled doubleheaders in the course of the year. Single admission. We'll give them extra roster spots for those games, and then you play 154. 154 for historical context. You want 154 games. They did that for 100 years. Not 158, not 152. 154. That buys you 8, and then you pick up 2 extra days based on the situation with the doubleheaders. And I don't think you have to give them an extra day off at the All-Star break either. Play 4-game series then. I give you another day if you want to do it that way. That's the way they should do it. But they are not going to do it that way. That is the way they should do it. Steve Torrey is in the house. Boy, you don't like the idea. It's like the draft when you get the pick 20 seconds before Goodell tells you to you, so you lose all the suspense. With this dribs and drabs. Now, I don't mind it that much because that means I'm not committed to watching the show at 8 o'clock tonight. But these dribs and drabs with the schedule is very, very tricky.
Well, now I saw something where the NFL, ESPN, and NFL Network, I guess they all agreed not to leak anything out for the draft next week. But that's all well and good, and that's great. But the problem is, you have these other people that are digging around for information. How can you stop somebody else? And you can't. And that's the same situation here. People are, you're getting information, and we're getting it since 1 o'clock this afternoon.
What people do is people go to the teams, and the team tells them, somebody tells them, everybody in the team's got the schedule, and the team tells them, hey, by the way, we're playing Thanksgiving night. Do you know that? And the Eagles playing Atlanta. Really?
And
then the information seeps out.
Everybody's got a source, and et cetera, et cetera.
And plus the fact you got a lot of teams, and everybody's working, working the phones to get the information. Simple. And that ruins the show at 8 o'clock at night. There's no need to watch that. I like to know the extra Thanksgiving Day games. I like to know the Saturday games around Christmas. There's a couple things I need to know. I like to know the second game of that doubleheader on the Monday, first week of the season on ESPN. But I get the basics right now. I know the first Thursday night game. I know Thanksgiving for the most part. I know the Patriots games that are big. Keep an eye on that. I know the first Monday. I know the first Monday night game. I know the Giants schedule. I know what the Jets are doing. I get a sense of what's going on. So tonight I'll sit there and watch the hockey, watch the NBA. I'm not going to sit there and worry about Rich Eisen breaking down the schedule for me.
Saves you some time. And it does hurt, I guess. Any of the is ESPN the one who's releasing the schedule? I believe it is. Right?
Well, no, the NFL Network is. ESPN's going to do a 2-hour draft schedule show, but I believe the schedule is released on the NFL Network first.
I guess that would make sense.
Why would they give it to ESPN?
I don't know. I just thought I saw something on.
They're
TV.
going to give it to They're going to give it to their network. There's no reason to give that to ESPN. ESPN doesn't pay for that. They give it to the network first, so the network will have it. And it's like the NCAA tournament. Why would the NCAA tournament give the matchups to ESPN? They give it to CBS.
Yeah.
They spent the money. Same thing. Now, that's not to say that ESPN will be right on top of it.
Yeah. Well, look. Either way, it's a problem. I guess there's no suspense, so that's basically what it comes down to.
You lessen suspense. And the 4 o'clock. The one thing I do know is the 4 o'clock games on CBS this year are very dicey. Because, one, there's not a lot of great teams at 4 o'clock that play in the AFC. The AFC West, all right, Chiefs, Chargers. And number two, the Patriots, who would be the lock 4 o'clock team, they have their 2 big NFC games. There are Fox games, Minnesota and Green Bay. So that was a problem. Their best 4 o'clock game, 4:30 game that I heard about on CBS was the Steelers and the Saints.
Yeah, well...
no, listen, they got Pittsburgh and Jacksonville too.
But the Steelers are going to play the Patriots again late in the year.
Oh, that one too. That
would be...
Those two. That's the second to last weekend in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So, you're going to have some decent games here.
I want a lot of good Sunday night games, especially late, and some Saturday games, especially late. I want an excellent Thanksgiving schedule that Thursday, because then that lessens the Sunday impact.
Of course.
And I can take it easy.
Yeah. That's what everybody's wondering and thinking about right now.
So I can take it slow. That's important. You follow?
100%. Yeah.
Don't have to worry about following the games, listening to the games, getting the scores. I get all the big games on Thursday and Saturday of those weeks.
That's right. There'll be no reason to pay attention to any part of the schedule that weekend at all.
Right. Like the sort of thing that you had this past year on that last Sunday. What was it, the last Sunday? Last Sunday was not bad. You had Ravens and Bengals. There was a couple of days there late in the year. You had a rough time with the Sunday drive.
Yeah, and you got your wish. As long as I'm tortured, you're good.
I know the Ravens-Bengals was a good finish for you, and that was late on New Year's Eve night.
That's it.
But I believe the Christmas Eve fare was rough.
Christmas Eve schedule, if I recall, was not great.
Yeah, and then you, of course, I was at church, and you
naturally,
with family, and then the
were you checking the scores on some of the bets that you made on Christmas?
And my Jewish friends were, Hanukkah and everything else.
Yeah.
The non-religious people may have been watching football, talking about football, but not the religious people on Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Any religious.
That's fine.
Matter of fact, I think I may have gone to a bar mitzvah that day.
On Christmas Eve?
Yeah, I think there was a noontime bar mitzvah.
First I've heard of it.
Yeah, noontime. It was up in Mount Kisco, a matter of fact. It was at the Sawmill Club.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not too far from your house, right?
Not at all. Pretty close, actually. Yeah, didn't hear about that.
About 4-hand away.
I don't know if it's that close.
Close enough. Right. Everything else under control?
As far as I know, yeah.
When are you going to get these glasses fixed?
Well, I've got like 3 or 4 of them, and this is the one I keep in the office because I don't like to transfer it back and forth, and it broke. So, who do I have to impress? You?
No, definitely not. Yeah. Definitely not. Do you like the Atlanta-Philadelphia first Thursday night game?
Sure, that's a decent matchup.
You like that?
Thanksgiving night, you got the Saints and the Falcons. That's pretty good.
How about Lions and Jets in that first Monday night game?
A little surprising.
Very surprising. And how about the fact that for about 5 straight weeks, the Patriots are on national television?
Yeah, I noticed that. Oh, are you surprised?
No, definitely not. Steve's got a sports party. He's on Mad Dog.
Mad Dog Sports Radio.